get me a gun, 'cause someone's killed this father's son. There's no rest, not for me, until your soul no longer roams free. Kiss the ground, bow to the earth. Your fate lies 6 feet under the dirt.
Here we are at the little Gunpowder mining and excavation module, and I've been asked so many times, how do you get your rock formations from styrofoam? So this is the last section that needs to be kind of artistically created above the town of Buttermilk Falls. And you can see the spray foam is in place right there. And I just thought I would just document a little bit of this on video. I just spent a couple minutes carving this section out right here. And I want to just kind of make mention that when you're doing this, it's not so much a carve, a pure carve. I like to call it a carve, poke and tear method. You can see this little piece is giving me a little issue right here. I like to get the point of the knife in there and just kind of, after I carve it, just kind of tear at it a little bit, and that kind of gives it the rock strata that you see throughout this entire area. Now, the interesting thing about this spray foam is that this is a skin, and this skin right here does not accept tempera paints or artist acrylics very well. So what you do is, when you're carving this, you need to get a very sharp blade, and you need to kind of remove this skin, but you don't want to go too deep into the initial foam. Otherwise, you're going to start to get air pockets and air bubbles that are involved in this process of curation. So you want to just kind of carefully just kind of shave off the skin. And once you shave off the skin, then you could start poking and tearing at it and creating the rock strata. So this is the process involved, and I'll go through each and every single one of these little blobs here, and we'll turn them eventually into this strata. And I'll give you an example right here. So I'm looking at this blob, okay, and I just kind of got my number 2 blade down in here, and I'm just gonna, after I get the skin out of here, okay, I'm just gonna kind of poke down and tear, and then poke down and tear. And sometimes you really get some neat relief out of it, and other times it's kind of an epic failure, and you got to fill it in with just a little bit of your plaster or whatever method of molding you're using. But this is it in a nutshell here. Just kind of remove the skin, poke. I call it poke and hope. You know, like when you're playing billiards and you really don't have a shot, and you just kind of poke and hope, and poke and hope. And you can see how this is starting to, excuse my, I'm stammering here because I'm suffering from my allergies. You can see how this is starting to take shape. And I'll poke and tear at it a little bit more here and get a little bit more relief and striation into this rock. And when I get done fiddling here, I'll zoom in and I'll show you what's going on. And the magic comes into turning this into rock, the next step, which is what you want to do to paint and seal this. And I'm going to show you that next. Okay, so here's a close-up of what I just did this morning. And again, this is above the town, so I'm not going for a lot of rock relief because I want it to appear in the distance. But that's pretty much what we have so far. And I'll show you what the next step is. Okay, so the next step is where the magic happens. And I use this stuff right here. Folk Art Home Decor chalk paint. It's not cheap, but it kind of finishes like almost a plaster hard surface. It gives the rock a really nice bite so that you can apply your washes of color as you would as if you were doing, say, white plaster castings. So we're gonna go with this. And you gotta be careful to keep this off of your existing rock, because this stuff really bites into the surface. And there's areas where you can go liberal. You can actually use this to fill in some of your air holes that may have been created when you're carving it. You tend to go through a lot of this stuff. Like I said, it's not cheap, but it really does a nice job, and it really makes the foam kind of finish off with almost a plaster cast look. You're not going to get that fine detail and relief that you would with a plaster mold, but what you lose in fine relief, you make up for in weight reduction, especially if you're doing, say, a module that's going to be transported from place to place. You're saving a lot of weight. And even though this has some weight, it's nothing compared to what you would be what you'd be adding to this in terms of plaster weight. This takes quite a bit of while to dry, so it's not like I'm going to be able to hit this with washes in about an hour or so. I'm probably going to have to come back to this tomorrow to start some washes, and by that time we'll hopefully have the rest of the upper town of Buttermilk Falls carved out, and I'll show you how I start to apply some washes to this. Now, if you're looking at this and you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, you know what, there's not enough relief in that, I like the fine strata detail of plaster mold, that's fine. No worries. I am modeling an area that is kind of somewhat a southeast Colorado, and in that area you have the volcanic rock, and that rock is very similar in appearance to what I'm molding right here and what I'm modeling right here. But again, it's time consuming. It's tedious in some areas, especially if you want to try and fill in some of those holes. It takes up a lot of your time in terms of the drying process, and you got to be neat with it and careful with it. You can't just go slather it all over the place like a drunken sailor. You got to be mindful of your existing scenery, because if this stuff drips on it, boy, I tell you what, it grabs and it stains really hard. Probably one of the questions you're asking is, can I go back and carve this stuff if I don't like the relief that I have? Sure, you can, of course. And there's been areas that I've carved that I've looked at and went, ugh, that doesn't look good at all. And I've gone back with the spray foam and just hit a blob in the area and have gone back and recarved it. But that's the way we do this. That's the way we've done this on this entire module. Like I said, there's only maybe about a handful, I'd say less than 10 plaster molds on this entire module, and everything that you see has been finished just like this. So that's it. We let this dry, and then we come back to that and we start to do our washes. That's our next step. So like I said, this is where the magic really starts to happen. And you could see that the rock formations really start to appear. Now, as you're looking through this and you see some air holes, I will go back with some plaster of Paris on my finger and just kind of wipe them in the bigger holes. But I don't get too crazy with this stuff because it's distant rock, and I really don't care. There should be things going on in the foreground that's really going to grab your attention, and not necessarily the fine detail of the rock strata that's supposedly a half a mile away. Give you another look from the side here. You can see how the relief will stick out in relation to the other rock work. And we're going to hit some color washes on that probably tomorrow when it dries. Okay, first wash. Typically, I always start with this cheapo dollar store acrylic paint, and this is a khaki color. And I put about a 50-cent piece squirt in one of my color bowls, and I add some water until it's about the consistency of milk. And I always start with a lighter wash, and that's basically all that I do, is I just stipple it all over Let it all run down. No matter what color I'm going to end up with the rock, I always start with this khaki color first. You can always go darker, but you can't lighten it up. So that's why I start with a lighter shade like this, and then build up washes of color. There's no rhyme or reason to it. I just kind of get it in there, work it in the crevices, work it in the cracks. Like I said, hitting all of it with this light khaki color first. And this is going to take some time to dry. I may or may not be able to get back to it tonight to hit it with another color. Depends on my humidity levels here in the basement. And the last couple days it's been raining here, so my humidity levels in the basement are pretty high. But that's it. I'll zoom in a little bit here so you can see the color go on. And there's an artist technique when you're painting called stippling. And that's basically taking the brush end and just kind of forcing it into the crevices. So I'm just kind of stippling the color into the cracks and crevices. Now they do make the spray foam in a black, and somebody once suggested to me and said, hey, why don't you use the black and then you'll have your dark crevices. I did try one small section and I didn't like it. I'd rather build up color off of the white, even though you're painting over the black. I still feel more comfortable with a lighter foam. And then if I want to add depth, I can always hit this at the end with some India ink diluted down and in my spray bottle. So that's it's basically how it is. I gotta move this tripod to hit this lower area here. But that's an idea of what the next step is. It's the first color wash. And we'll get some grays in there, and we'll get some siennas in there. We'll try and make the area look like it's distant, but it's coming together. But that's basically the technique. You just build up your washes, and by the time this is done, this may have 10 or 12 washes over it to build it up. I know that some artists, some model railroaders like to paint their rock and then highlight it. I find I get more realistic results to my eye by building up washes and colors from there. So looking at Buttermilk Falls Mountain, we have 7 washes on there now. And this always gets to the phase where I call it the I don't know phase. Like, I don't know if I need to go deeper. I don't know what more tint I need. I don't know what more relief I need. But this is where we're at, and there's probably going to be a good 5 more washes before this area is blended into the existing mountain. Okay, so after 14 washes, we've now blended the area in. The existing gray with some tan hues, some raw sienna was blended into here. This existing area with some burnt sienna and some browns and some grays. And then we're gonna just do one more wash on this one with a little bit of burnt sienna to bring out some of the burnt sienna that's in these rocks. Like there's just this one outcropping right there. And we blend it into the background. I'm gonna zoom in here so you could see. Hopefully the camera picks up the colors well. So starting at the base of the town and kind of zooming up. My camera is really making things look a lot darker than they are. The colors here are very light. They're not as grayish black looking either. I don't know why my camera is doing that, because everything has more of a raw sienna kind of tone to it. But the area is now done. All the rock work is done on the little Gunpowder mining and excavation module. It's time to finish up some structures, and it's time to get this thing running.
get me a gun, 'cause someone's killed this father's son. There's no rest, not for me, until your soul no longer roams free.